My name is Ethan, a 35-year-old man who has been married to my wife, Sophia, for nearly 7 years. We first met at a small community fair in the town of Maplewood. I remember the day clearly. I had approached her with a sense of nervous excitement and asked her out. To my relief and delight, she said yes, and from that moment things took off between us. Our relationship was like any other, filled with ups and downs, but it was wholesome, and for that I had always been thankful. For the longest time, we weren't trying for a child. Both of us wanted to enjoy our youth while it lasted, traveling and exploring life before taking on the responsibility of parenthood. But last year, something changed. We both felt ready to take the plunge, and soon after, Sophia became pregnant. The beginning of this year marked the arrival of our daughter, Lily. I've always wanted to be a father, and when Lily was born, it was the happiest moment of my life. Words can't even describe it. However, adjusting to parenthood proved to be challenging. We quickly realized how much our lives would be tied up with this new responsibility. Without close family or dependable friends nearby, it became nearly impossible to have a moment to ourselves, let alone a day off. The idea of hiring a nanny crossed our minds, but it was an expense we simply couldn't afford, so we dismissed it. The thought of going out to a restaurant without our daughter seemed like a distant dream, and we knew that if we wanted to do so, we'd need to arrange for someone to babysit Lily. Unfortunately, with limited family members nearby, this was easier said than done. I'm not complaining. I'm just explaining the situation. It was because of these circumstances that I decided we needed to get a baby monitor. My thinking was simple. If Lily was sleeping, as babies tend to do for long stretches at a time, we could possibly go somewhere close by and rush back if she stirred or woke up. I know it sounds irresponsible on paper, but the lack of spontaneity was starting to weigh on us. When I discussed the idea with Sophia, she was understandably apprehensive. She wasn't keen on the idea of leaving Lily at home for any extended period, but I assured her that we would never go anywhere more than a 5-minute walk from our place. We left the decision hanging, with the expectation that we'd talk about it again later. Sophia runs a small flower shop on the corner of our street. She's always had a creative flair and a deep love for flowers, so when my uncle passed away from cancer and left me an empty storefront, it was a no-brainer to let her use it rent-free. It was a prime location, and it was going to benefit both of us. She hired a couple of girls to help her out, so she wasn't always at the shop, but she did go in most days. Meanwhile, I work remotely, so it was a setup that worked well for us. One day, while she was at work, I decided to buy a Wi-Fi baby monitor on a whim. I recognized that we hadn't both concluded and agreed on it, but I didn't think winning her over would be a big ordeal. The monitor arrived the next day while she was at work again, so I set it up in Lily's room. It was a small camera that could easily go unnoticed when the blinds were drawn or the lights were off. The camera connected to Wi-Fi, and I could use an app on my phone to check the monitor no matter where I was, which was pretty cool. After setting it up, I went back to work and somehow forgot to tell Sophia about it when she got home. Chapter 2. A heart-shattering discovery. The very next day was one of those rare occasions when I had a bunch of errands to run. I was looking forward to it, because it was one of the few times when I could be entirely free of parental duties, even if only for a few hours. But just as I was about to leave the house, Sophia asked me to take Lily with me. She was exhausted from the week and desperately needed some time to herself. I won't lie, I was a bit disappointed. I had been looking forward to a few hours to myself, but I couldn't say no to her request. This wasn't the first time she'd asked me to take Lily along, and I hadn't been able to the last time she asked, so I agreed this time. I packed up Lily and all her necessities and started to run my errands. The day went smoothly enough. Lily was well behaved, and I was making good progress through my list. I was sitting in my car, enjoying some fast food, when I got a notification on my phone from the baby monitor app. It had detected activity in Lily's room. My first thought was that Sophia had gone into the room to do something. That was the logical assumption to make. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and what I saw made my heart leap into my throat. There, in Lily's room, was Sophia, kissing another man. At first, I thought she was being assaulted. My protective instincts kicked in and I started the car, ready to race back home. But then, I heard the sounds that made it clear she wasn't being assaulted. They were making out, and my shock quickly turned into a burning rage. I don't know why I couldn't stop watching, but I kept the app open, recording what was happening on the screen as evidence. I watched as the man's hand went under her blouse, and then he tried to take off her underwear. When I heard her moan and saw him bend her over the edge of Lily's crib, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw my phone aside, feeling a surge of anger and disgust that I can't even begin to describe. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to drive back home and hurt them both, but the only thing that held me back was Lily. She was sleeping in the car seat, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. I couldn't do anything reckless, not with her there, but I felt so helpless. I wanted to confront them, to make them pay for what they were doing, but I knew I couldn't do it while I was so angry. I needed to keep my composure for Lily's sake. I asked myself over and over if this was why Sophia had asked me to take Lily with me. Was this what happened every time she asked me to take our daughter out of the house? The thought made me sick to my stomach. By the time I picked up my phone again, the room was empty. I sat in the car, paralyzed by a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't know what to do. Most of the places I needed to go had already closed, but for some reason I decided to finish the last errand on my list. I think I needed something, anything, to take my mind off what I'd just witnessed. Eventually, I went back home. Sophia was concerned about why I had gotten back so late, but I made up some excuse, and she bought it. The urge to confront her was overwhelming, but I knew I needed to wait until I could think clearly. My emotions were too charged, and I didn't want to do anything rash. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the living room, thinking, fuming, and trying to figure out what to do next. This was 2 days ago, and I've been struggling ever since not to explode. I have the evidence, but I don't know how to proceed. Do I confront her? Do I use it against her in a divorce? I'm in no position to make logical decisions right now. Everything I do will be fueled by emotion, and I want to avoid that. The consensus from those I sought advice from was clear. I needed to confront her, and soon. So the following morning, after a sleepless night, I decided to do just that. When Sophia woke up, I gave her about an hour before asking her to sit down so we could talk. She seemed worried and kept asking if something was wrong, but I stayed silent. I started by telling her that I had bought the baby monitor. She looked at me, confused, and simply said, "Okay." I then told her that the baby monitor had been operational the day I ran those errands. The confusion on her face deepened, and she said nothing. I could see the exact moment she remembered what had happened that day. Her eyes widened, and she jumped slightly in her seat, covering her mouth with her hand. We sat there for what felt like an eternity. She was struggling to figure out what to say, but I didn't want to give her the chance to rehearse an excuse. So I asked her point blank, "Why did you cheat on me with that man?" She started to cry, trying to speak through her sobs, but her words were unintelligible. I repeated the question, but the same thing happened. She couldn't give me a real answer. I asked her again, this time with more force, but all she could do was sob louder. The frustration inside me grew. I asked who the man was, and it took nearly 10 minutes before she calmed down enough to answer. When she finally did, she told me he was nobody important. I scoffed at that. How could he be nobody important if he was in our daughter's room with his? I couldn't believe her response. "Nobody important?" I repeated, my voice tinged with disbelief. "He was important enough to be in our daughter's room, Sophia. He was important enough to—" "You know what? Never mind. What's his name?" She hesitated, clearly struggling with the decision to tell me the truth. At first, she tried to play dumb, claiming she didn't know his name, but I wasn't buying it. "Don't lie to me, Sophia. You knew him well enough to let him into our home and do that in our child's room." Eventually, she caved and told me his name. Adam Rivers. It wasn't a common name, and I made a mental note to remember it. I knew I would need this information later, but for now I focused on getting answers. "Why our daughter's room, Sophia? Do you have any idea how disgusting that is?" My voice was shaking with anger. I could barely contain myself, and I knew I was on the edge of losing it. Her response floored me. "You didn't even wait for me to say yes to the baby monitor," she muttered, her voice full of misplaced accusation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So now it's my fault? Because I didn't ask for your permission to buy the baby monitor. You think that justifies what you did? You're saying that if I hadn't bought it, you would still be able to cheat with some random guy in our daughter's room?" She burst into tears again, but I didn't feel any sympathy for her. Her tears meant nothing to me at that moment. Instead, they only fueled my anger further. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to calm myself down, but it was impossible. "This is pathetic, Sophia. You're pathetic," I spat, finally stopping to look at her. "You did this to yourself. You chose to destroy our family, and you did it in the most vile way possible. I needed to get out of the house before I did something I would regret." I grabbed my keys and stormed out, leaving her sobbing on the couch. As I drove aimlessly around town, I tried to clear my head and figure out my next steps. One thing was clear. I couldn't stay with her. I needed to end this marriage, but I wanted to do it in a way that would make her regret ever betraying me. The next morning, after a restless night, I made a decision. I called my best friend Mark and explained the situation to him. Mark had always been the person I turned to in difficult times, and this was no exception. He listened patiently as I recounted everything, including my confrontation with Sophia. "You need to file for divorce, Ethan. She doesn't deserve you, and you need to protect yourself and Lily," Mark said firmly. "I know a great divorce attorney. My wife used her when she divorced her first husband, and she's brilliant. She'll make sure you get everything you deserve." I agreed, and later that day, I met with the attorney, Sarah. She was sharp, experienced, and didn't pull any punches. After I showed her the evidence I had gathered, including the video from the baby monitor, she assured me that we had a strong case. "We'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity," she explained. "The video is damning evidence, and we can use it to make sure you get full custody of Lily. As for the division of assets, we'll push to keep the house and any other significant assets. Sophia doesn't deserve anything after what she's done." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief for the first time since this nightmare began. With Sarah on my side, I felt like I could take on anything. That evening, I returned home and informed Sophia of my decision to file for divorce. She was shocked, but I was beyond caring. I told her I would be staying in the house and that she needed to find somewhere else to live. She begged and pleaded with me, but I was resolute. "You brought this on yourself, Sophia. I'll be filing for full custody of Lily and I'll be keeping the house. You can't expect to walk away from this unscathed." She had no choice but to pack her bags and leave. As I watched her walk out the door, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, but most of all, a determination to move forward and rebuild my life without her. The weeks leading up to the court date were grueling. Sophia and her attorney tried to fight back, arguing that the affair was a momentary lapse in judgment and that she deserved a share of our assets. But Sarah was relentless. She brought up every detail, every piece of evidence, and she made sure the judge knew just how deeply Sophia had betrayed me and the sanctity of our family. The video footage played a crucial role in the trial. The judge's face hardened as he watched it, clearly disgusted by what he saw. Sophia's attorney tried to downplay it, but there was no escaping the truth. It was clear, undeniable evidence of her infidelity. When it came time to discuss the division of assets, Sarah made a strong case for why I should be awarded the house. "This was a family home, Your Honor," she argued. "It's where Mr. Bennett is raising their daughter, and it's where they should continue to live. Mrs. Bennett forfeited her right to this home when she decided to betray her husband in such an egregious manner." The judge agreed, awarding me the house and full custody of Lily. Sophia was granted visitation rights, but they were limited and supervised. As for the financial settlement, she received nothing more than the personal belongings she had taken with her when she left. The divorce was finalized quickly, and I felt a tremendous sense of relief. The burden of the past few months had been lifted, and I could finally start to focus on rebuilding my life and being the best father I could be to Lily. Even after the divorce was finalized, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do more. Sophia had hurt me in ways that I couldn't easily forgive, and I wanted her to understand the full consequences of her actions. I thought back to the man she had cheated with, Adam Rivers, and decided that I needed to reach out to his wife. It didn't take long to find her on social media. Her name was Hannah, and she seemed like a kind, unassuming woman. I felt a pang of guilt as I prepared to message her, knowing that what I was about to do would shatter her world. But I also knew that she deserved to know the truth, just as I had. I sent her a message, explaining the situation and including the video as evidence. She responded quickly, asking for more details. We ended up talking for hours, and I could hear the pain in her voice as she came to terms with what had happened. She thanked me for telling her the truth, and I could tell that her marriage was over. A few days later, I received a message from Hannah. She had filed for divorce and was planning to move back to her hometown with their children. She thanked me again, saying that I had given her the strength to move on. Knowing that Adam's life was falling apart gave me a sense of closure. He had been a willing participant in the destruction of my marriage, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions. But there was still one more thing I needed to do. Sophia's flower shop had been her pride and joy. It was the one thing she had poured her heart and soul into, and I knew that taking it away from her would be the final blow. I walked into the shop one day, about a month after the divorce, and told her she had 30 days to vacate the premises. Her eyes widened in shock, and she started to cry, pleading with me to let her stay. "I'll start paying rent, Ethan, please. This shop is all I have left," she begged, but I was unmoved. "You should have thought of that before you destroyed our family, Sophia. You have 30 days. Make the most of it." I watched as she tried to salvage her business, but it was clear that she was struggling. Without the shop, she couldn't keep her brand alive, and her once thriving business began to crumble. I knew she was trying to save face. Her social media pages still claimed that the shop was closed for renovations, but I could see through the lies. The shop was gone, and so was the life she had built for herself. As I sit here now, typing out the final words of this story, I can honestly say that I'm the happiest I've been in a long time. It's been a difficult journey, but I've come out stronger on the other side. I have full custody of Lily. The house is mine, and I've ensured that Sophia will never forget the consequences of her action. I won't lie. There's still a part of me that wishes things could have been different. I wish Sophia had been the person I thought she was, and I wish our family hadn't been torn apart. But I've come to accept that some things are beyond our control, and all we can do is pick up the pieces and move on. As for Sophia, I haven't heard from her in months. The last time she called, she begged me to forgive her and let her use the shop again. But I'm not swaying on that. I've moved on, and I've left her in the past where she belongs. Lily and I are doing well. I'm focusing on being the best father I can be, and I found a sense of peace that I didn't think was possible after everything that happened. Life goes on, and so do I. Months have passed since the events that turned my life upside down, and I've found a new sense of purpose. I've reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and even started dating again. It's a strange feeling, putting myself out there after everything I've been through, but it's also exciting. I'm taking things slow, focusing on building a future for myself and Lily. Looking back, I can see that everything that happened was a blessing in disguise. It forced me to reevaluate my life, to let go of toxic relationships, and to focus on what truly matters. I've learned to trust my instincts, to stand up for myself, and to never settle for less than I deserve. Sophia is a chapter of my life that is now closed. I've moved on, and I've found happiness again. The future is bright, and I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next.